Welcome to Learner's Planet, my dear children. Children, in the previous session we studied about joints and we also studied about the skeletal system. I hope you are clear with the skeletal system. And in today's session we will continue this lesson with one more interesting system of our body, and that is nervous system. Right? So let's start with this system. Yes. Children, first of all we should know that what is nervous system all about. What it is actually carrying out function in our body. Yes. Children, the nervous system controls the different organs of our body, like the brain. The brain is the control center of our entire body. It may be also called as human computer. Why it is called as a human computer? Because the brain not only controls what we think and feel, but also how we learn and remember and the way we move and talk. So you can just imagine that how important this organ is. So you can just think that nervous system controls the different organs of our body, like the brain, and brain controls all such things, right? So we will take here an example, a very interesting example. Imagine that you are at school studying science subject, but your mind keeps drifting to the birthday party of your best friend you have tonight, and the bus which will come to pick you up the next morning, and how you wish that you hadn't skipped lunch because the rumbling in your stomach is driving you crazy. Then suddenly you are back in the movement, hoping that nobody noticed you. Right? This must be happening to you. This must have happened to you. Right? So all such things are going on and on. So why it is actually going on? Let us see. Yes, it is all because of the brain. It is the brain which always thinks and always tries to do something. It is always on the go. Right? The brain not only controls what we think and feel, but also the way we move and talk and run, all these things. But also many other things like which we are less aware of. Like the brain controls many other things such as the beating of heart, the digestion of food, and yes, even the stress we feel. Right? So you can just imagine that this organ controls so many things. Even the things which we are not knowing, which we are less aware of. Right? Now can you think that beating of heart takes place by the brain? Right? Now do you know that when does our heart beats? It always keeps on beating. It never stops. Right? And this is controlled by our brain. Right? So you can now think that our brain is quite a juggler, because it always keeps on going on. It always keeps on thinking. It never rests. So be active like the brain. Right? So this is the most incredible organ in the nervous system. Now, if we think of the brain as a central computer that controls all bodily functions, then the nervous system is just like a network that relays the messages back and forth from the brain to different parts of the body. But here, the brain alone does not work or controls. It has to take help of any other organ also, right? Through which the brain can get the information from all the different parts of the body. Now how does this take place? It does this via the spinal cord. Yes, the spinal cord which runs from the brain down through the back and contains thread-like nerves that branch out to every organ and body part. Now you can think that spinal cord is such an organ that has or contains thread-like nerves Means it will branch out to every organ and every body part, so that the messages which are received from the brain can reach to each and every part of our body, the different parts of our body. And from that different parts of our body, spinal cord will collect all the information and it will send back to the brain. So how does this takes place? Brain and spinal cord work together, right? Alone brain cannot perform all the functions. Yes, it controls all bodily functions, but it also needs help of spinal cord, right? Now we will take here an example, like when a message comes into the brain from anywhere in the body, the brain tells the body how to react. For example, if we accidentally touch a hot or a cold stove, the nerves in our skin will shoot a message of pain to our brain, and the brain then sends a message back telling the muscles in our hand to pull it away. And luckily, this relay race takes a lot less time than it just took to read about it, right? So you can just imagine that how fast a brain works in just fraction of seconds, right? Now you think that you are going to touch any hot stuff, right? And before touching, the brain gets the signals and the brain gets the messages, and the brain sends a signal that you don't have to touch that because it is hot, right? So it is just a matter of fraction of seconds that the brain works and responds and sends us the messages that you don't have to do such thing. This is cold, this is hot, this will be painful, this will be good. So this all things can be sensed by our brain, and that is why we consider brain as the human computer or the supercomputer, right? Considering everything that the brain does, the human brain is incredibly compact. Means it weighs just 1.3 kgs, 1.3 kilograms. So how interesting it is, how amazing it is that it is just weighing 1.3 kilograms. It has many folds and grooves, though it provides us with the additional surface area that is necessary for storing all the body's important information, right? Even the spinal cord, on the other hand, is a very long bundle of nerves, right? And it extends from the lower part of the brain down through spine or the backbone. Remember, try to recall, we studied about the spine, the backbone, right? So where does the spinal cord extend? It extends from the lower part of the brain down through the backbone, and along the way there are many nerves which branch out to the entire body, and that is why brain and spinal cord work together in this system. So let us see that how this brain and spinal cord are protected. Yes, both the brain and the spinal cord are working so much, so they need some protection. Yes, they need some protection, and they are protected by the bones. The brain is protected by the bones of the skull, and the spinal cord is protected by the set of ring-shaped bones called as vertebrae, right? So do you remember vertebrae? Try to recall this term which we studied in the skeletal system, right? So always remember that this protection is very much necessary. The protection by the bones, either by the bones of the skull or even by the ring-shaped bones. Now imagine that if there were no bones, then there would have been no protection, right, on the brain and the spinal cord, right? So you can just imagine that if any person meets an accident, then what happens? Yes, if the brain and spinal cord are not protected by the bones, then what will happen? Yes, severe injury can happen and the brain can damage on the spot. if there is no protection by the bones. The spinal cord can even get damaged if there is no protection by the bones, right? So bones are some of the hard covering. It acts as a protective layer for the brain and the spinal cord. And you know that this protection is very necessary because brain is the control center. It controls all the bodily activities, right? So always remember this. Now we have discussed about the brain and the spinal cord, right? We have given an introduction, but now let us discuss about the brain in detail. Yes. So what is it? The brain controls just about everything we do, even when we are asleep, right? It controls our body movements and help us to store information in our memory. How can this take place? Why do your eyes blink without you ever thinking about it? How do you remember the way to your friend's house? How do you remember your friend's name and teacher's name? How do you remember what you studied? How do you give an examination which you studied last night about the subject you studied last night? How do you remember that these are your parents and these are your friends and these are your relatives? How you are able to remember this? Where do dreams come from? Suddenly one day, one morning you wake up, right? And you say, oh, I thought this was going on and this dream was going on, right? At some time you just think, you just wake up and you say, oh, I broke out of my dream. I was dreaming that I am just roaming in a Ferrari or a BMW or Audi. So how this is happening? Where do the dreams come from? Yes, it is all because of our brain. Our brain is in charge of all these things and a lot more, right? Our brain keeps on working. In fact, we can say that our brain is the boss of our body. It runs the show and controls just about everything we do, right? So we can say that our brain has 3 different parts that work together, right? So these are the different parts which are present in the brain and we need to know about it. And these are cerebrum, cerebellum and medulla, right? These are the key players on the brain team, right? So just imagine that some match is going on in which the brain is the boss and these are their players and they have to run the show. Now how they will run the show? Let us discuss about all these players, all these parts. Yes, first cerebrum. Yes, this is the biggest part of the brain because it makes up 85% of the brain's weight. So we will just now see the picture and we will come to know that how much part it makes. The cerebrum is actually the thinking part of the brain and it controls our voluntary muscles. Voluntary muscles means the ones that move, the ones which can move the actions which are in our control, right? The muscles which can be controlled by us. This is termed as voluntary. Voluntary means which is in our control, right? So just imagine that cerebrum is the biggest part of the brain because it makes up 85% of the brain's weight. And it is also called as the thinking part of the brain because it thinks always and controls our voluntary muscles which are in our control, right? So this is the picture of the cerebrum. Now you can see this brown part, brown and blackish part, right? This is cerebrum, right? Now you can see, you can just imagine that this is whole 100%, right? And out of this 100%, cerebrum makes up 85%. Means how much? This much area, this whole area, right? This is cerebrum, makes up 85%, right? So you can just imagine that how much percentage it is consisting of our brain, right? So it is acting as a control center, as a thinking center. Right. Now the cerebrum, it's very easy to see. It is the thinking part, and it is the one which that can move when we want them to move. So we can dance or kick a football without our cerebrum. Always remember that. Right. When we are thinking hard, we are actually using cerebrum. We need it to solve math problems. We need it to figure out some picture. We need it to figure out some games and even to draw a picture. Our memory lives in the cerebrum, right? So it is actually considered as the largest part of the human brain, and it is responsible for such activities like learning, memory, intelligence and logic. So always remember that it is the largest part and it is responsible for learning, memory, intelligence and logic, right? So as we discussed that our memory lives in the cerebrum, that is the short-term memory and the long-term memory. Now you must be thinking that what is this short-term memory and long-term memory? It's very simple, children. What we ate for the dinner last night and what we ate for the lunch today and what we ate in the breakfast today morning, this is short-term memory, right? And long-term memory is, just for example, the name of that roller coaster we rode on 2 summers ago or 2 winters ago, the trip which we had been to Europe or America or London or any other place in India, the name of that place and the name of that restaurant, or the name of the place where the hotel or the motel in which we lived 2 winters ago. This is, all such things are the long-term memory. So this is the main difference between the short-term memory and the long-term memory, right? The cerebrum helps us to reason, like when we figure out that we had better did our homework now because our mother is taking us to movie later, right? So this is all about the cerebrum, which also helps us in reasoning, right? The cerebrum has mainly 2 halves. It is divided into 2 halves with one on the either side of the head, right? Some scientists think that the right half helps us to think about the abstract things like music, colors and shapes. And the left cerebrum, the left side of the cerebrum, is said to be more analytical. Means it is helping us with maths problems, then logic and speech. So scientists do know that the right half of the cerebrum controls the left side of our body and the left half of the cerebrum controls the right side of the body. So this is very true, right? And how amazing it is, right? So this is all about cerebrum, which makes up 85% of the brain's weight, right? Now let us move on to another player of this show. Do you remember that? Yes, it is the cerebellum. Then let us move on to the next player, cerebellum. Yes, the cerebellum is at the back of the brain and below the cerebrum. It is a lot smaller than the cerebrum at only 1/8 of its size, but then too it's a very important part of the brain. Always remember, children, that size don't matter. Size doesn't matter, right? If anything is very smaller, that doesn't mean that it is not important, right? Always remember. Do you remember the story of an elephant and an ant, right? Yes, ant is very small and elephant, as you know, it is very large, gigantic animal on the earth, right? On land, right? But that doesn't mean that an ant can't do anything. It can do it can do everything, right? It is very important. So in the same way, cerebellum also consists of very small part of the brain, but do not go on its size. It's very important part of the brain. So let us see what functions it carries out. Yes, This is the picture of the cerebellum. Can you see this? Cerebellum, which we discussed, that cerebellum is at the back of the brain below the cerebrum. So this is the cerebrum and it is present below the cerebrum, right? Obviously it is very small, but it is very important because it controls balance, movement and coordination, like how our muscles work together. And because of our cerebellum only, we can stand upright, we can keep our balance and we can move around. So you can just think that how much important it is. Think about a surfer riding the waves on his board. What does he need most to stay balanced? Think about the skater who skates. What does he or she needs most to stay balanced on that? Yes. Do the surfer needs the best surfboard or the coolest wetsuit? No. He needs his cerebellum, right? Even while skating, that person needs cerebellum, means the balance. And that is why cerebellum is considered as the balancing act, right? That means the balancing organ, because it balances, it controls the movement and coordination of our body. And that is why we are able to do all such things, right? So do remember that cerebellum, even though it is very small in size, it is very important part. Right, now let us move on to third player of this show. Yes, it is the medulla. Yes, it is also known as the brain stem. So where is it located? The brain stem is located beneath the cerebrum and in the front of the cerebellum. We'll see in the picture just right now. Okay, it connects the rest of the brain to the spinal cord, which runs down our neck and back. So you can just imagine that how important it is, because it connects the rest of the brain to the spinal cord, which runs down our neck and back, right? The brain stem is in charge of all the functions of our body which are needed to be alive, like breathing air, digesting food and circulating blood. Oh, so this is also so amazing, right? Let us see the picture and the functions, other functions which brainstem or medulla carries out. Yes, this is the picture of the medulla. As we discussed that where it is located, yes, it is beneath the cerebrum, as we can see, and in the front of the cerebellum, right? So this is the front of the front, and this is medulla, which is in the front of the cerebellum and beneath the cerebrum. Okay. So part of the brainstem job is to control our involuntary muscles. Yes, involuntary means the actions which are not in control of us, right? It controls activities such as heartbeat, breathing, swallowing and sneezing and hiccups, all such things, all such activities. So these all activities are the involuntary activities performed by brainstem, right? Now these activities, how can we say that these are involuntary activities? Because these actions are not in our control. We do not have to say our heart to beat, right? Always remember this, right? Can you just give a thought? Can you just think that whenever you are asleep, you might be thinking that your body is at rest or body is sleeping, you are sleeping, then the brain is also sleeping. No, this is not possible. The brain is not sleeping, right? You do not have always to tell your heart to beat. Come on, heart, beat now. Is this possible? No. You do not have to tell your body to breathe. Come on now, oxygen is available over here. This is the fresh area. This is the fresh place where there are many green plants. Come on now, breathe. And this is the place where there is much pollution. Do not breathe. Can you tell your body like this? No, you cannot. Can you tell your body to swallow? No, it will swallow on itself. Can you tell your body that do not sneeze now? This is not the time to sneeze. My teacher is standing just in front of me and I don't have to sneeze. It is so embarrassing, right? So this is possible? No, this is not possible, and that is why it is termed as the involuntary one, right? So brain stem controls our involuntary muscles. It is in charge of all these functions, right? Means it will work automatically without we even thinking about it, right? So there are other involuntary muscles in the heart and stomach, and it is the brainstem that tells our heart to pump more blood when we are exercising, or our stomach, or it also tells our stomach to start digesting our breakfast or our lunch or dinner, right? So the brainstem sorts through the millions of the messages that the brain and the rest of the body sends back and forth. Wow. So it's a very big job for the brainstem. So if we are considering brain as the boss of our body, then definitely brainstem acts as a secretary for it, right? So always remember this. This is also the very important key player of the brain, right? So this was all about the brain parts. Let us also study about one more such main organ, that is spinal cord. This is also a very important organ of our nervous system, right? As you know that spinal cord is a thick cord of nerve tissue which extends down the brain stem. Can you see here? This is the spinal cord. This whole is the spinal cord. We studied about the different parts of this brain, right? And it extends, the spinal cord extends down from the brain stem. Here is the brain stem, and from here the spinal cord extends down, right? So we can say that it is a bundle of nerves that carries messages between the brain and the rest of the body, and it is protected by the backbone. So this is our spinal cord, and after that is the backbone, right? So it is surrounded and protected by the backbone or the spine, right? So this is our spinal cord, where it is located. Now let us see what functions it carries out. Yes, the spinal cord is responsible for the transfer of information between the brain and the rest of the body, which we discussed right now. It even controls the actions that do not involve the brain, right? So such actions are called as reflex actions, right? So you can just imagine, you can just think that why your leg kicks when the doctor taps your knee with a little rubber hammer. It is all because of our reflex, right? So spinal cord plays a very important role in this thing. Spinal cord very quickly sends a message to the brain, and the brain finally responds that this is hot or this is cold, and this is what we do not have to do. But what we are discussing here is the actions that do not involve the brain. That do not involve the brain means if anything is happening which needs to be response very immediately, then the spinal cord will send the message. The spinal cord will take an action which is known as the reflex action. Reflex means it is an involuntary action or the automatic action that our body does in response to something, without even having to think about it. Means the body will not think, right? And wherever the body will not think, that means the brain is not in the chapter. The brain is not playing a part in that thing, right? So the brain here is not involved, and the spinal cord does response to that action or something, right? Like we don't decide to kick our leg, it just kicks, right? So there are many such reflexes, and every healthy person has them. In fact, we are born with most of them, right? So reflexes protects our body from the things that can harm us. Means it will respond so very fast, it will respond in such a fraction of second that even brain does not have to think about it. Means it will not involve the brain, the spinal cord will only respond. And this response, these actions are called as reflex action. So always remember that reflex actions are carried out by the spinal cord, controlled by the spinal cord, not the brain. So children, I hope that you enjoyed this session and learned about something about our nervous system.